Hello, everyone. This is Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritually Inspired show. And my guest today is Derek Loudermilk. Derek is a former pro cyclist and extreme microbiologist turned professional adventurer, author, and lifestyle entrepreneur. His podcast, The Art of Adventure, has become one of the top entrepreneurship and travel podcasts. Derek is known as a unique business strategist who helps unconventional entrepreneurs and thought leaders grow their business. As an international speaker and trainer, Derek regularly presents on topics such as human potential, skill mastery, and the adventure mindset. Derek has been located independently for 5 years and traveled the world with his wife and two young children. They have lived in 6 different countries as a family. As the founder of AdventureQuest, Derek leads entrepreneurs and thought leaders in transformative adventure experiences around the world. Thank you for joining me, Derek.
Claudiu, great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Derek, like many of us, seem that you followed a pattern imposed by family uprising, then early school education, societal constraints, where we have little wiggle room to escape the rut of our parents' life or our grandparents' life, and we need an enormous amount of determination to break from the norm. And only later in life, in our 30s or 40s, we realize that we live someone else's dream. How was for you?
Well, I think it's telling that in hindsight we can see that we had these invisible scripts playing for our lives, and an unspoken assumption for how we would live our lives, our careers, and the trajectory of our life. And sometimes you have awareness that, oh, I'm doing this because my parents told me to or my teachers told me to, but sometimes it's invisible. You don't necessarily know. And that was my case. I had just sort of taken the things that people had told me I was good at, like science, and things that my dad did, I was copying off of him a little bit. He was a microbiologist, so I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm gonna exploring different career options in entrepreneurship and traveling the world. I didn't have the perspective to see that it's like the fish in the bowl. They can't see the water until they're outside of the bowl. And that's kind of my experience through largely travel and starting businesses, that I was able to get that perspective.
I know that this year you are going to organize a mastermind called the League of Superconductors, which is based on your book, which was a bestseller. I'd like to focus a little bit on certain modules that are related to the subject of my show, such as mental modules, quantum physics, magic, mythology, and multidimensional awareness. Can you expand a little bit on each of them, please?
Yeah, so the group is a mastermind for entrepreneurs, for thought leaders. And so these are people like podcast hosts or authors or coaches or speakers, people who create online courses using their expertise, leading the way in their fields. And my program is unique in that we incorporate both the MBA side, the business side of things, and the adventure side, but also the spiritual aspect. Because if you're a master at business and you're a master at risk and flow and all these fun things that have to do with adventure, and you've mastered yourself, you're still, if you're not operating in alignment with sort of your higher self, and if you don't understand some of the basic laws of the universe, then you're still going to get challenges that you're not sure why you're having them, or sometimes you'll hit plateaus that don't make sense for you, or sometimes you'll have a great run of success and then things will get taken away and it won't stick. So there's an important piece to understand the underlying nature of the universe and spirituality that's going to ensure your business both feels good and works smoothly on many levels. So it's an important piece of these four pillars of what I do with training these thought leaders.
And on the spiritual side, can you give us an example of what exactly you are teaching these business people or authors or entrepreneurs to apply in their daily life?
Sure. So recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've been working with Dreamtime and understanding how lucid dreaming and dream symbolism can be used in the creation of your waking 3D reality, and using your will and your intent in dream time in order to manifest that, or understand, asking questions as you fall asleep, preparing yourself before bed to send your higher self to go find, where should I be looking for clients, or what decision, should I open an office in this country, or something like that. So utilizing more of what's available in sort of the higher sense to help you make better business decisions, to tap into your intuition, and to create more smoothly the things that you want to see in the physical world.
So in other words, you open up their minds to their subconscious potential, and you embed those messages, subliminal messages, which can work while they sleep and create the future of what they want to achieve pretty much.
Yeah. And as I as the coach, as the trainer, I'm looking at different, let's say, fundamental principles, whether it's a business principle or a spiritual principle. And I'm trying to figure out, how can I train this? How can I teach people to utilize this? So I have to try sometimes a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different, is there an effective method or steps or experience that I can lead people through that will actually, so there's a difference between knowing something and like really understanding it. And, that's the difference between a lived experience, a truly experiencing something, versus just reading it in a book, or even if somebody's told you about something a few times, this certain type of knowledge you actually have to experience. So I try to figure out how I can create situations to get people to having the experience where they'll know it.
Yes, I'm a big proponent of experiencing various situations rather than just reading. And even if you read about them, it's nice to go ahead and then try to have your own experience, because your perception and your lifestyle is different. So you look at it from a different angle.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that you visited Vietnam at one point in time, and you interacted with a local indigenous tribe. How was that interaction for you?
Yeah, this was the Hmong tribes in northern Vietnam, and we spent a few days sort of trekking through the high mountain region there. And one of the peak experiences was the Sunday market day. And what was unique about this was each tribe had their own sort of color that they would wear. So on market day, you would see the white tribe and the red tribe and the black tribe and the blue tribe, and they would all come, and these garments were incredibly fancy and just tons of jewelry. But it was so cool to see them just descend out of the mountains to this market, and they were all laughing and smiling all day long. And just really, each weekend, I assume it's like a big festival. And I guess I just appreciated that, each of these, so culturally, right? Like each tribe has its own way of being, but they're all sort of part of the larger ethnic group in this sort of southern China, northern Vietnam area. And yeah, I can't say that it was, what's coming up for me now is not that it was extremely different than any other, maybe more urbanized place, but it was just such a caricature, such a clear, like, here is this unique way of being that they have here. And it was just really just a pleasure to see, and the weird food that they were eating that you didn't see anywhere else, and the clothing, and how everything's the same but different, right? They're all wearing clothes, they're all eating food, but it's just this special, unique thing that's only in this pocket that felt like a discovery, I suppose.
Yeah. You are one of the few people I know which made their bucket list public. And I know one of the entries on your public list on your website is meeting Dalai Lama. It's listed like number 64. So how do you plan to meet him, or even leave the universe work on that? And in case you meet him, what will be the unique question you would like to ask him?
I think the reason why I want to meet him is I just want to feel what it feels like to be in his presence. And, I imagine that would just unlock my ability. So what I'd really love is to be able to be more like him and to somehow unlock that ability in myself by spending time with him. I have a few friends that are friends with him. And so I think that at this point, and this is a longer term process that I've been doing, is building my relationships over the last decade, where I'm usually about one introduction away from, a world leader or a celebrity or a billionaire at this point. So I think I could meet him, but I'm kind of also waiting to cash that in to the timing when I think it's right. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to partner with him to raise money or awareness around a specific cause. And maybe I'm not sure exactly what that effort looks like right now, but I think it'll become clear when it's time. And because he has a lot of influence, he raises a lot of money, he gets people to take action on important things, and I think it'd be amazing to partner with him and his organization in some capacity to affect change.
Yes, I once met a lady who was traveling through India, and she stopped in Dharamsala, and Dalai Lama was supposed to be there, and it was a big gathering, and all the foreigners were at the front, on the front row. And at the end of that ceremony, he said, "I would like to meet with all the foreigners," and she was one of those, and she didn't have the chance to ask questions, but she got his blessings, and it was quite an interesting experience for her. So going down your bucket list at number 97, you have listed climb Mount Rainier in Washington. And it's interesting because on my first interview for this show with my guest, Derek Loudermilk, he mentioned that Mount Rainier attracted him from New York to Seattle, and now he lives in Seattle. And his first trip down the highway, he saw the mountain and the big native Indian sitting on top of the mountain. So I'm pretty sure you will have a very intense experience when you're going to do that.
That's interesting. I'm sure there's some good spiritual reason to have that. It's an impressive mountain. You can see it when you're in Seattle. It's just right there. I can't think of a lot of other cities. I guess Denver, you can see the mountains just right there in front of you. It's one of those it's a good training ground for mountaineers because it's challenging enough, but it's good for beginners so that you can sort of learn the ropes on the lower slopes, and then you can summit and it feels hard, but it's only 14,000 feet. It's not 28,000 feet.
What do you expect from reading the Bible and the Quran, which is another item on your bucket list?
Yeah. I started reading the Bible, and this is actually something my grandparents, they're super Christian. They said every year, they're like, you should read the Bible. My grandfather reads it cover to cover every year. And he says he learned something from it every year. And it's probably, the best or one of the best books ever written. They say the good book. And I'm sure that there's be a ton of stuff, but again, the timing hasn't felt right. I haven't felt dedicated to the process. So I started reading, and what I really enjoy is historical context or understanding. Right, so in the Bible, there's what actually happened historically, and then there's the Bible's documentation of it, which may or may not have changed over the years, right? So having some different historians weigh in on the accuracy of the history of it. But then, right, so that's kind of the old Old Testament stuff. And then the New Testament, right? So what, just looking at, and I think what's fascinating is similar vein to the Dalai Lama, what can we learn from the way that Jesus was being and how he approached life? I think is probably the important lessons for me. And I'm actually, what's coming up for me right now is as I think you mentioned in one of our correspondences that you're also a Christian, and I'm wondering if you've read the Bible or how much time you spent.
I did read it, everything. I selected certain passages, but what I did in order for me to better understand the teachings, I read the Second Coming of Christ, written by Paramahansa Yogananda, which is the one who founded Kriya Yoga in US and in some schools in India. And he is very thorough with the New Testament teachings, and gives the exact meaning of what Jesus wanted to teach and show us during his life on earth. And also he wrote the explanation of Bhagavad Gita, and there is a correspondence between Bhagavad Gita and the Bible. And you're gonna see the similarities. It's just unbelievable, especially that Bhagavad Gita was written, 5,000 years before the Bible. So there is some recycling of those ideas, which we always should go back and try to assimilate based on, how the society has evolved and the modernity of everything surrounding us.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's I'll have to make sure to go investigate that.
And I did start the Quran, but I wasn't able to. I didn't have the time to go beyond like 4 or 5 pages. But I think it's good for us to understand different points of view, even if I come from the angle where we are one. We come from the same source, and doesn't matter what we believe in, as long as we all try to aim towards the same point, self-awareness, self-realization. I don't mind what you believe in. As long as you respect me, I respect you. I don't think I'm better than you. So I think that will calm things down on earth a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's potential to focus on the similarities rather than the differences there.
When are you planning to do your 10-day Vipassana retreat?
I don't know. The danger of having a public bucket list is that someone's going to ask you about them in an interview. I've done sort of mini personal Vipassanas, like day long. I've experimented also with fasting without food. Haven't done a dry fast yet, but this part of the larger picture of just self-experimentation. I've done vision quests and different again, placing myself in different experiences, and oftentimes coming with a hypothesis. What do I expect this experience will be like? And oftentimes it's it's much broader than you could have ever expected. And because I think it's normal for us as biological humans we're in a box of our senses, right? And our understanding of reality is largely, we believe, limited to what our senses are telling us. And then when you step outside of that, or when you remove something, or when you just change your reality a little bit, whether that's through psychedelics or fasting or breath work or whatever it may be, you get another outside perspective of what reality really is. And so you can start to piece together this understanding of what is the universe really like and what's my place.
And did the fasting help you in any way? Did you find any benefits?
The presumed benefits of, I think this is going to be good for my health long term. Because when I'm in the middle of the fast, I actually feel quite terrible. A lot of people feel great, and I always envy them, because for me, it starts off, they say, okay, after 3 days or maybe 4 days, you start feeling much better. For me, it's just like a steady decline every day, worse and worse. So I've done 8 days so far, and by the end, I'm just ready to start eating again. I get a lot of pleasure from eating. As an athlete, especially, my food consumption rate is much higher than people. So I've probably eaten 3 times as much food as most people have in their life, which I just really enjoy. Good food, good meals. But what it has done is when, like today, actually, I got to, it's maybe 1 o'clock, and I realized I hadn't eaten anything yet. And before, that would have really upset me. That would have, I've been hangry, where you get hungry and angry and you can't function properly. But now, if I miss a meal or 2 or 3, or if I'm traveling for 24 hours and I don't get a good meal, that's not that important, because I've done much harder things. So again, it gives that, I keep saying the word perspective. Maybe that'll be a theme for this show, but I don't get upset when I can't get meals, and I see people around me when they, they're in this habit, right? Eat every 4 hours while I'm awake. And when all of a sudden it's been 5 hours since a meal, it starts to trigger that warning, that fight or flight sense, because, oh no, the habit's being broken. You're not actually in danger from, eating an hour later, but it feels like it to them. So I have, in a sense, greater power over my thoughts and feelings because I'm not ingrained in these habits.
Yes, and it's all about our minds. I mean, I gave up alcohol and coffee, I think 5.5 years ago, and it just happened overnight. I said, I'll do it. Let's see how I feel and how it benefits me health-wise, and never look back. I mean, I really don't care if I have the coffee or, the former sip of wine. I don't care anymore.
Yeah, and when I see people, when people give up alcohol or coffee or sugar or smoking or any of these things, a lot of times these habits are there because the reward of the habit it's giving them what they need, and that's fine. But then something comes along that's more important, and for a lot of people, this is more clarity or more access to their own abilities, like their own intuition or clairvoyance or dream time. And if you do an experiment, if you find, wow, eating clean and cutting alcohol enhances my superpowers, well, then you have to decide, is it really worth consuming sugar and alcohol? And for a lot of people, then it's not, because the abilities are much more valuable.
Yes, and for me, it was a test for non-attachment. Am I attached to, drinking coffee or drinking a glass of wine, or I can get just disregarded and move forward? And yes, I realized that I have no attachment to these habits. You're a certified nonviolent communication mediator. And in such, confusing times when fake news collude with corporate and the government interest, it takes a little spark, to ignite panic and hysteria. As part of your training, what would you recommend to those listening to us?
Well, that's actually I've studied it a lot and practiced it a lot, but I don't have the certification yet. That's another goal item for me. But I use it the most in my marriage. And this is something that's been a continued process. It's, I don't know if it's ever, if we'll ever get to a point where we're totally good at, authentic relating or nonviolent communicating, but just having these structures, these ways of speaking in order to really clarify and understand someone else's point of view, before needing to have your own point of view heard. I think that's one of the fundamental things there. And when I get into trouble in my marriage, it's because I'm not understanding my wife's point of view clearly enough. And that's what a lot of this communication is there's some also ability to communicate your own experience. What are you feeling? Can you describe it? Having emotional literacy or understanding the physical feelings in your body in order to share what you're feeling. But a big part of that is the literacy to understand what someone else's experience is in the first place.
Yes, and I can confirm that communication is an important way of having a good relationship with your wife. I know I failed a couple of times and it wasn't pretty, but now things are okay. And again, communicating with your wife or your partner or spouse is very, very, very important.
You know, I have a personal enjoyment of arguing, and a lot of my friends are, you know, some of them are lawyers, some of them are journalists, and they're very, very sharp. And so in college, we spent a lot of time debating and arguing. And my wife doesn't like that at all. She doesn't like to have me play the devil's advocate or anything like that. So I really have to show up differently when when I'm hanging out with my friends and when I'm spending time with my wife.
Yeah. One of your long-term goals is to catalog and document the world's greatest traditional and the native art and put it into a comprehensive display. It's a big endeavor. Why do you want to do that?
That's a good question. You know, this is one of those, there's no clear productive reason. There's no necessarily economic benefit, but I've always been a collector, and I always seek out artisans wherever I go. So people that are hand making beautiful objects. And there's something about this artisanship that's it's, you know, it's not mass produced. There's the expression of the artist, the creator in these things. You know, I have maybe you can see right up here is a mask that I had carved by what I think is the greatest mask carver in Bali. It took him a full month to carve this mask. I'm actually, you want me to go grab it? And yeah, let me hold it up. So here's a couple examples. So this is a barong mask.
Beautiful.
This is definitely, you could find this in a museum.
Yes.
This is one of the Balinese gods, barong, and typically you would find one of these displayed at the entrance to someone's house or compound. And then this is a huichol from Mexico, and these are tiny little beads that are created that he puts, you know, it's like wax, beeswax, and then they're essentially painting with tiny beads. And, you know, really I get an appreciation of one, collecting and just looking at and re-looking at these beautiful pieces, but also talking to the artists and watching the artists work when I go to these places. And so it's kind of like a quest. It kind of gives meaning to travel when you're, you know, if you're going somewhere and just being a tourist, you can just go and do some hikes or spend time on the beach or go out to dinner in Paris or whatever. But if you have a quest, there's something sacred about the journey. I'm going to seek out the craftsman. My goal is to find the right piece for this collection. And so I'd love to just build in quests to travel in order to give it that extra meaning of experience.
And these guys in South America and even in the Caribbean, they are amazing craftsmen. I mean, we look at a lot of artwork in Cuba, Mexico, Dominican Republic, and they are so inventive, and they love to do something new every single day. It's just unbelievable. I mean, I look at this entry on our bucket list from a different angle. It's like a way of, you know, preserving indigenous knowledge. I wasn't sure how deep you want to go, if you're just looking at artists, or you're looking at, you know, shamans or their medicine men, and try to, you know, gather information about their ceremonies in South America, like the plant medicine ceremonies, or in North America, the sweat lodges. But now I get a better understanding of what you're trying to achieve.
And, you know, I think that would be so really this is like the quest for the physical object. But if you were to go and talk to these shamans and spend time with them, and I've spent time with a few of the priests or the shamans in a few different cultures, and really that's like collecting stories. That's collecting, because there's no way you're going to tap into their whole vast universe of knowledge, but you get this little sliver of their wisdom, whatever is meant for you right at that time. And so that, I would say some of those experiences have been like, the next step, the next rung of the ladder for me, for what I needed for my own development at the time.
And if I may ask you, what was the most transformative spiritual experience you had during your traveling?
I've got a bunch of stories for you. There's two. Can I share two stories?
Please.
The sort of the one that really opened my eyes a lot more than anything else was this tree. I call it the magic tree, and this is probably an 800 to 1,000 year old tree. It's deep in the jungles of Bali, and actually a lot of my foundational spiritual experiences happened there on that island. So we trekked. We were back in the jungle, and we came across this tree, and it's a special tree because it has 3 trunks that come together and form a single tree. So like a tripod. It's just a magnificent tree. It reminds me of the tree in Avatar. This just, huge magical tree. And as you walk towards the tree, it's got its own field. You can feel it and it sucks you in. But when I put my hands on this tree for the first time, it was an electromagnetic, a sort of, when you experience a rush of adrenaline, just turning the body's field way out, just like a zap. But what also happened was that essentially I traveled, my experience of being traveled to a different place, which is a different forest in northwest China, I believe. And there's this place where the desert is flowing, like sand dunes are flowing into the forest. It's like the forest is disappearing and the sand dunes are taking over. And it was a very dramatic, sort of scary realization that, wow, it's not necessarily that we're cutting down the forest. It's just that the forest is disappearing and everything's drying out. And so that was a message for me from the tree. So it was the first time I had ever had an entity like a tree do something for me or to me, send me on essentially a projected experience, like an out of body experience. And that was just, I didn't really know that was possible until it happened. And then, that kicked a whole bunch of lines of inquiry off for me from there.
Did it last long, or just a fraction of a second?
So I put my hands on, and I started to get this flood of, visions and the sensations. And so I took them off, and I was like, whoa, what is going on? And I had a friend there who, a woman I was dating at the time, and she was much farther along in her spiritual journey than I was at the time. She said, why don't you take 20 minutes? And so I actually found like a spot where I could have a lot of physical contact with the tree, kind of like a little nook. And so I sat down inside the tree and I let the experience sort of flow through and over me. And so I think that was a great suggestion to really, just let it happen, because she put her hands on the tree and nothing happened. So it was clearly meant for me. It wasn't just a general, here's what's happening, but it was like, you have a quest. And so that's why I started my AdventureQuest branch of my business, because part of the mission that I was given was to take people into nature to grow their leadership using nature and outdoor experience to guide their development, to guide the coaching process. So that's, I started taking entrepreneurs and leaders out into the wilderness on adventures because of that.
Yes, and I recently recorded a short video about the fact that when we lose forests, we lose our consciousness. Like water, they retain our memories. They have their own life. They have their own vibration, their own entities. And people don't believe that there are spirit trees out there. And if you look closely, you're gonna be able to see, the face embedded into the bark, and it's very telling. And you have to know how to talk to the tree, how to approach it, with love and compassion. And the whole forest will talk back. And I also recently read the Hidden Life of Trees, and it's a whole dimension after your mind explodes with information after you read such book and you understand the ecosystem and the life, what's happening, which is happening in a forest. It's just unbelievable.
I think it's 27 different senses that they can use. And they communicate with the, electric pulses, just like our nervous system. And there's so many similarities. Yeah.
And they help each other, even if they are of a different breed, they really help, and they communicate. And what's your second story?
Okay, so the second story highlighted for me the power of our thoughts and our intention to change physical reality. And so this is, after the fact, I've learned, right, that we've done physics experiments like the double slit experiment that prove our thoughts affect material 3D reality. But at the time, I didn't really understand that or know it. This was part of a world record attempt that we were doing. We were successful. This was the 3 Peaks Challenge. We were climbing 3 volcanoes, the tallest 3 volcanoes in Bali. And we had to climb it faster than 18 hours up and down all 3. So you have to start at essentially midnight on the first one so that you can finish before sunset on the third one. And so we started with the hardest, the biggest one at midnight, and we arrive at the base of the mountain, and there's a giant temple. It's the mother temple, the biggest temple, the most important temple in Bali. And this is the sacred mountain, Mount Agung. And the trail is behind the temple, and there's nobody around. It's midnight, there's nobody around, nobody in the parking lot. It's nice and quiet, nothing out of the ordinary. Our 2 guides show up on their motorcycles, of course. And we all synchronize our watches. Okay, 5 minutes to midnight. Here we go. Let's starting the official timing of the record. And we walk around behind the temple to the trailhead, and there is 5,000, 10,000 people already behind the temple and already on the trail, snaking their way up the mountain. If you look up the mountain, it's like just a trail of flashlights and headlights as far as you can see, miles up the mountain.
Incredible.
And everybody's dressed in white, and that's the only trail. So there's holy men, and there's fathers and sons, but there's also babies and grandmas and people carrying chickens and flowers and goats and pigs and things, because they're going to do a ceremony and like sacrifice them into the volcano. So it's not very fast. It's not a world record setting type pace. So we don't have any choice but to file in line with everybody else. And just so people are hiking in flip-flops, these are huge boulders, and it's a volcano. We're in our, high-tech mountain climbing, high-speed gear, and they're just wearing, flip-flops. And so it was, it was really enjoyable, but also we were worried because we're way behind our record-setting pace. And we get to the top of the mountain. It's about 4.5 hours up, a couple hours back down, and most of the ceremonies took place halfway up the mountain. So we were finishing our climb just as they were finishing their descent. Excuse me. And we learned from our guides. So our guides didn't actually know about this. They were locals, but they didn't know this was happening. So this is a big, big, big secret ceremony. And the objective of this ceremony was to turn on rainy season, was to go from dry season to start 6 months of rain, essentially. And within 6 hours, it started raining, and it rained for 6 months. And, there, maybe it's coincidence, but with 10,000 people all intending for this one thing to happen, I now see that there's, probably a direct result of this intention. And it was just so amazing because so we were behind our record after the first volcano. We made up some time on the second volcano. And on the third volcano, when it started raining, we felt refreshed and rejuvenated. And because we had rested on the first volcano, we were able to go really fast on the last one. So we ended up breaking the record by 3.5 hours, 14 hours and 53 minutes, or I believe is what we set it at. And so, but it started raining on us, and we were like, oh my gosh, they told us this was the ceremony to turn on rainy season, and here it is. And the rain stayed, and they did it, and it was just so remarkable. And I would have chalked it up to coincidence if I hadn't have learned all the reasons why fundamentally that's probably what happened.
Yeah, I believe in intention. And another example is, and this is a movie, but applies to real life. It's Emerald Forest. Takes place in Brazil in the 70s, I think. They were building a big dam along one of their main rivers. And the indigenous people said, we cannot leave this dam to be finished. And they invoked the frogs. And tens of thousands of frogs started to whack, 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 and they brought the rain. And it was a heavy rain for a week or 2 weeks, and the dam was decimated by water. It was just an unbelievable intention they had in order to serve the Amazon forest.
Wow, that's a good story too.
What are your next plans?
That's a good question. I'm in a place where I'm letting things unfold. The idea is to combine whatever I'm interested in, whatever I'm learning about, whatever I'm obsessed about right now, with how I think I can help people. And a lot of times people do, again, back to the invisible scripts where we started this conversation, what other people are telling them to do or what they think they ought to do. And really, I'd like to approach, even in my life, more from a place of what I really want to be doing, what's bringing me joy. And largely it's when I get obsessed about something. And then if I can combine that with what's helpful, what's useful, where I see that I can do some good, whether it's in the business world or my larger community, that's, as if I can link my obsession to how I can be helpful, that's how I'm approaching things right now.
Interesting. And your business is all online based, and that's even better these days.
Yeah, a lot of people are learning what it's like to operate remotely. I've been doing this for 8 years now. Obviously we're not doing the in-person trips and retreats right now, but I think it is a great time for people to be sharing their knowledge, training, using their experience and their skill set to teach other people and, sort of help other people master what they've learned. So even a lot of my clients are doubling down on their online courses, their online programs, their coaching programs, working on books. A lot of people are working on books right now. So yeah, in my program, the League of Superconductors, that's a year-long program. And I've reopened the program for people because it's such an important time to train that side of business skills. So yeah, just want to mention that we have spots available there for people that are trading online.
I will add your links to the description of the video so people can contact you, visit your website, and check your programs and previous summits and retreats and everything else. Derek, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to learn more about you, and until next time, thank you.
Claudiu, thanks for having me.